Welcome to our Bible study as we continue in our journey through the book of Genesis. As we began this study, we talked about the book of Genesis means beginning, and it's new beginning. We're seeing this establishment of this covenant that God made with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob. And now today, we're going to the fourth generation. We're going to be looking at the life of Joseph. Now, as we look at the life of Joseph, Jacob is still going to be involved. The brothers are going to be involved. But we see how God used Joseph in an incredible way. But it starts in tragedy. Like many of you, I have dealt with some skin cancers. I've had a few surgeries where they have removed some different types of skin cancer from me. But a couple of weeks ago, I went to the dermatologist, and the dermatologist says, we've got to do some treatment because you have some precancerous spots. It's not cancer yet, but if they're not taken care of, they will become skin cancer. And so, in a few days, I'll probably look like I have leprosy because I'm going to have to put that cream on that will address those precancerous conditions. But the whole purpose is so that it doesn't get worse. What we see as we begin to dive into the life of Joseph, we see that this dysfunctional family had some issues, that they didn't deal with these issues. And because they didn't deal with these issues, there was a cancer that grew within the family to such an extent that murder even became the subject of killing one of the brothers became a topic. So let's begin looking. We're in Genesis chapter 37. We're going to cover this chapter, so I'm going to have to go quickly, but I'll make some comments as we go along. And then at the end, we'll pull out a couple of truths for us. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. These are the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. Keep in mind, Joseph was one of the two sons of Rachel. Jacob had children by four different women. Two were wives, two were the handmaids. But Rachel, this wife that Jacob loved so much, gave him two sons, Joseph and then Benjamin. We did not cover this, but if we had gone back just a little bit, we would have seen Rachel has died while giving birth to Benjamin. So Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. Now perhaps that was youthful indiscretion, but anyway, he was kind of a tattletale, and that kind of started it. Now Israel, keep in mind, that is Jacob. God changed his name to Israel. Now Israel loved Joseph more than the other sons because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age. If we took the time to do a little study through through Genesis about the age of Joseph and the age of Jacob, what we would discover is this. When Jacob goes to Egypt, he's 130 years old. And when Jacob is 130 years old, we see that Joseph is 39 years old. Now you subtract those two. That means that Jacob was about 91 when Joseph was born. So Joseph really is this son that's born in his old age. And it says that Jacob, or Israel, made a robe of many colors for him. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the brothers, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. So it starts out with jealousy. Now keep that in mind as we go through this chapter. It all starts with the brothers being jealous. You may say, well, they had a right to be jealous. Dad treated him better than he treated the other brothers. Dad gave more affection to him than he did the others. The reality is we cannot control all the circumstances that come into our lives. These brothers could not control the circumstance that their dad perhaps unfairly did give preference to Joseph. But that does not give them an excuse to bear a sense and jealousy within their hearts and lives. Jealousy is this precancerous condition that if it's not dealt with, it will become cancer at some point in time, and it does in their lives. So keep in mind, all of this started with jealousy. Verse number 5. Then Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." "Are you really going to reign over us?" the brothers asked him. "Are you really going to rule us?" So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. We don't know exactly the age difference between the brothers, but Reuben is the oldest, and Joseph is the next to the youngest. Benjamin's the youngest. Keep in mind, Joseph was born in Jacob's old age. To the best that we can guess, and this is a guess, it's not hard facts, but more than likely there's somewhere 12 to 15 years difference between Reuben and Joseph. So let's just go with that 15 years, which is not an unreasonable thing to think, 15 years. So if Joseph is 17, that would mean that Reuben is 32. So these brothers are stair-stepped in age, going down from 32 down to around 17 years of age. So Joseph has this dream, and perhaps it's youthful indiscretion. It's not necessarily wise that he told this dream, but he did. But the dream had everything to do with the older brothers serving the younger brother. That's not the way it went in that culture. Remember, it all had to do with the older ones. So the jealousy that started because the father gave preference to Joseph, the jealousy has now turned to hatred that we find in verse number 5. But then it turns into hated him even more in verse number 8. Do you see the progression? Jealousy, hatred, even more extreme hatred. But it doesn't stop there. Verse number 9. Then Joseph had another dream, and he told to his brothers, "Look, I had another dream. This time the sun, the moon, the 11 stars were bowing down to me." And he told his father and brothers. And his father rebuked him. "What kind of dream is that you had?" he said. "Am I and your mother and your brothers really going to come and bow down on the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So Joseph kind of digs a deeper pit, if you will, no pun intended, that he's burying himself into with his brothers. Verse number 12. His brothers had gone to pasture the father's flock at Shechem. Jacob is in the area of Hebron at this time, the valley of Hebron. If you get your map out and you look at this area, Hebron is south of Jerusalem and Shechem is north. It's about 50 miles. So 50 miles from Hebron to Shechem. So they have gone a fair distance away to take care of the flocks and get them into ground where there is grass for them to pasture. So his father says, I'm sending you to them. So Israel said to him in verse 14, go and see how your brothers and the flocks are doing and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the Hebron Valley and went to Shechem, 50 miles. A man found him there wandering in the field and asked him, what are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers, Joseph said. Can you tell me where they're pasturing their flock? They moved on from here, the man said. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Now Dothan is another 15 miles farther north than Shechem. So now we've got this gap, we've got this distance of 65 miles that he has traveled from home. Verse 18. They saw him a distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, oh, look, here comes that dreamer expert. I have a feeling they weren't expecting Joseph to show up. I mean, Dad has sent Joseph to check out how they're doing and how everything is going along. And he's 65 miles from home. But when they look in the distance and they see Joseph coming, now how did they know? Well, probably he had on that coat of many colors. He probably had that coat on that was very unique, that his father had made for him, had given to him, and they saw him. And because there was jealousy and hatred and even more hatred, now they say in verse 20, come now, let's kill him. Look at the progression. Look at the progression. Jealousy to hatred to more hatred, now to murderous schemes. They said, we'll just say that a vicious animal ate him, then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. It's not just murder, it's premeditated murder. In our society today and in our judicial system today, there is murder, but there are, if you will, different degrees of murder. Now, yes, when murder takes place, that means someone has died. But you've heard of second-degree murder, you've heard of first-degree murder, you've heard of premeditated murder. This is premeditated. They are plotting, they are scheming for him to die, and then how to cover it up. Verse number 21. When Reuben heard this, Reuben was the older brother, he tried to save him. He said, let's not take his life. Reuben also said to them, don't shed blood. Throw him into a pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. While Reuben was intending to rescue him from them and return him to his father. Reuben apparently had a conscience about this. And he wanted to stop the insanity, but he wasn't either brave enough or did not have enough respect of the brothers to completely change their minds. Verse 23, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's coat, the coat of many colors had on, and they took him, they threw him into a pit. The pit was empty without water. And they sat down to eat a meal. Look at the callousness. They have thrown their brother into the pit, intending for him to die, and now they are eating at the edge of the pit. They're pulling out their sack lunch, and they're having a meal saying, you know, he's going to die. We're just going to let him starve to death. We're going to let him thirst to death there in that pit. But they looked up and here comes a caravan of Ishmaelites, cousins, if you will, that were headed down to Egypt. And so Judah said to his brothers, what do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he's our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers agreed. Finally, they come up with this agreement, but keep in mind, the idea was we're sending him away. Well, we'll never have to see him again. He's as good as dead. He is going to be gone. And when the Midianite traders passed by and his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit, they sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who took Joseph to Egypt. We're going to begin to see a correlation between Joseph and the ultimate Redeemer of Jesus Christ and how all of this covenant was fulfilled. Anytime we hear this pieces of silver, what comes to mind? Well, of course, it's Judas betraying Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. 20 pieces of silver was the value of a male slave in that day. So they literally sold their brother, pocketed the money, said we'll never have to see him again. Verse 29. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. It's a sign of mourning. He went back to his brother and said, "The boy is gone. What am I going to do? How am I going to talk to my dad? How am I going to tell Dad about this?" So they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a male goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the robe of many colors to his father and said, "We found this. Examine it. Is this your son's robe or not?" His father recognized it. "This is my son's robe. A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned his son for many days. All his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will go down to Sheol to my son mourning." And the father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. We see the progression of sinfulness from jealousy to hatred to more hatred to mocking to murder. Let's pull a couple of truths out for us today. Number one is this: guard your heart against jealousy. Guard your heart against jealousy. Listen to this over in James chapter 3, verse number 16. Matter of fact, in your chapter, you might want to write that reference somewhere. James 3:16. For where there is envy, now envy is jealousy. For where there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there is disorder and every evil practice. Did you catch that? For where there is jealousy, there is disorder and every evil practice. Guard your heart from jealousy. Secondly, though, keep a tender heart. Keep a tender heart. It is so easy for our hearts to become calloused. And that's exactly what happened with these brothers. Now we see that Reuben, he tried to have that tender heart. He did not want to see his brother killed. Even Judah came in and said, there was some callousness there. Yes, we'll get rid of him. We'll send him away, but still, let's not murder him. Perhaps there's different levels of callousness. And I think all of us have the propensity to have a calloused heart if we're not careful. Callous against other people. Let us maintain, let us strive to have a tender heart. We'll do so if we realize every person is precious to God. We can easily lose it. We're in a divided world today. We're in a culture today where there is such hatred, there is such callousness in hearts today against others. This week, on college campuses across our nation, we're seeing students that are marching and calling even for death against others because of their ethnicity, because of their faith beliefs. There is such a callousness. And because someone has a certain faith belief, and this week it's against Jewish students, next week it may be against someone else. I mean, it's not about a particular group. The fact of the matter is that people can become so calloused and then get caught up in such a mob mentality as these brothers did, that their hearts become evil. Take these two things away. Don't miss them. Guard your heart from jealousy. Don't allow a precancerous condition turn into cancer. Take care of it. Heal it. Get rid of the jealousy. But secondly, keep your heart tender. When those thoughts come, when those biases flare up, when those prejudices seem to overwhelm us, go back and look at people and say, Jesus died on the cross for them just as He died on the cross for me. May I look at them through God's eyes. May I have compassion on them as God has compassion on them. And may we pray for them that they will turn their hearts to Jesus Christ, and instead of have hearts of hatred and jealousy and mocking and even potentially murder as these brothers do, may we have a heart of love. Our Father, thank You for this study of Genesis, how incredible it has been to see some of the things that these patriarchs dealt with. And these families of patriarchs dealt with are the exact same issues we're dealing with in 2024. Lord, keep our hearts tender to love You, to love others, and to follow You daily. Through Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. Have a blessed day.